buildings. Just a quick introduction, as Quentin already mentioned, and probably some of you already know us at this point. We are a team called 3x3. We are a social innovation consultancy, and we have been chosen to lead this community visioning process. And there's with us on the call is Priyanka, and we also have Judy in one of the language facilitating rooms, as well as Jeannie. She's also facilitating one of the language rooms. Which brings us kind of back to the reason why we are here. So the main reason being why we are doing this process together is there has been a fire at the building of 70 Mulberry Street early in January this year, which destroyed part of the building and which cost the city afterwards to commit $80 million to the rebuilding process. And as part of this commitment, the city has also launched the 90-day visioning process that Quentin has mentioned to explore the different options for the future of the site and to identify some alignment across the different community stakeholder groups. And as also was mentioned on a few occasions, 70 Mulberry Street is really like an anchor within the community. There's currently 5 different tenants within the building. So we have the Chan Dance Center, we have the Museum of the Chinese in America, we have United East, and we also have CPC and CMP. And as part of the committee of the $80 million, there was also a promise that the previous tenants would be able to return to the building after the completion of the rebuilding process. And I also want to mention that throughout the community visioning process, one of the demands by the community to add a protective covering to the building has been responded to, and it was added in October earlier this year. As part of the visioning process, there was also an advisory committee that Quentin mentioned. I'm not going to go over the names again, but essentially it's the 5 tenants, elected officials, as well as the community board 3. We are the chosen facilitator for this process, and the process itself has been started by the city. I do want to take us back a little bit because where we are today is not where we started out a few months ago. So we brought back up the process slides, so to give you a bit of background of what has happened over the last 3 months. And we kicked off this project earlier this year in September, started with some research, had a first round of community meetings, which were referred to as the listening sessions, where we tried to understand the different needs on the ground, went into an analysis and had a second round of community meetings, which helped us start building out different kind of scenarios. We added a survey that was also launched as part of the process, and then had a few weeks ago the town hall and the workshop. And all this is now accumulating into the synthesis for this report and the findings that we are going to share. And also to remind everyone a bit of the goals that we had for this process. So it was about identifying and validating some of the existing community needs. It was also about identifying and assessing some of the concerns, but also starting to really surface and understand a bit more the different pros and cons of the different strategies to implement and foster dialogue amongst the different stakeholder groups. All that to come up with a feasible vision for the future of the building that we are going to share today. And another reason why we were brought on board is also in the interest of process transparency and to ensure the efficiency of this project moving forward and adhere to the 90-day deadline. For the visioning process itself, we followed 3 different lines of inquiry in order to achieve those goals. And these lines of inquiry were closely aligned with the aspirational role, exploring the different roles that 70 Mulberry has played in the past, but also is meant to play in the future, and some of the values that have been surfacing throughout that. Another line of inquiry that we followed was the actual building design and construction of the building. So what are the different design aspects and the consideration of the rebuilding process, and allowing the community to weigh in on them, and understanding and surfacing some of the concerns and opportunities. And the third line of inquiry was around the future service and offerings, so understanding what could be potential service offerings and programs to be offered through the building in the future. And with that, I'm going to go over the findings of the process. But before we get started, I just want to note that this meeting is being recorded. It will be added to the website, as have the other videos of the other sessions already been. I'm asking everyone whenever there will be a Q&A afterwards following the presentation. Whenever you speak up, to please introduce yourself and the organization that you're representing. I also just remind everyone, we are a big group. We are more than 100 people already on the call. So just to be respectful of everyone else, to take your time, but also to listen carefully to others. Also muting yourself if you're in a very noisy background when you're not speaking or when you're not speaking up. And if you want to, or you can also choose to like add your name or like change your name in Zoom. So that makes it a little bit easier for us to also identify who is with us tonight. And with that, I want to go over some of the general findings of this process. I do want to mention that we have organized also the findings into different sections. So there's general findings, there's findings around the role of the building itself, and of course, around the future design scenarios also for the building. So as one of the findings that stood out of this process was that really time was viewed as like the main concern of participants in this process. So we had 41.6% of respondents that had really selected the lengthy rebuilding process as their top concern moving forward. So we see this as like a priority of speeding up for rebuilding it will be one of the priorities moving forward. Another concern, or like what that was kind of attached to, and the different risks that were associated with this concern, is the potential extended duration of the rebuilding process, as well as like some of the associated funds via reappropriation that might get lost, but also the cancellation of the rebuilding process altogether, and as well as like a loss of economic and other opportunities while the process is still ongoing. Following the concern of time were the concerns of privatization of the building, as well as of the possibility of a reduced budget that participants voiced through the survey, as well as through the different community meetings. So there were tensions around like a potential transfer of ownership. We had 34.3% of the respondents selected that there's a concern that it might be sold to a private developer. Many community members also perceived the privatization of the building as an equivalent to the loss of the community service, with management and operations not working in the public interest. There was also a huge concern that was voiced by 33.6% that focused on the possibility of a reduced budget. We all know we are undergoing a current crisis within the city, but also there was a strong concern that the budget might be reduced. And the inability to see proof of the budget allocation fueled a fear, and also a disbelief that the promise might actually be upheld by the city. Also, fortunately here, we were able to get a commitment, or like to have that addressed throughout the process already by the publication of the actual budget line of the $80 million, which can now be publicly viewed. Another concern that was very strong across the process was how to memorialize, just adapting the screen for a second. There was a strong call to memorialize 70 Mulberry Street's long-standing connection with the community and its very unique historical architecture and its relationship to its immediate surroundings. So that was another concern that we have seen throughout the meetings, as well as throughout the survey, that we had 32.3% of the respondents about the potential, being concerned about a potential loss of this character. And also through the community meetings, we were able to go a little bit deeper into like what actually constitutes this very unique character. And it's a combination really of nonprofit tenant services, then historical architecture, as well as in relation to its neighborhood, creating a sense of community within Chinatown. Another concern that surfaced throughout, again, both ways of data collection, which included the survey as well as the community meetings, is that we had 27% of the respondents being concerned about a negative impact of like having an additional high rise so a 20-story building in the neighborhood. So that is something we also wanted to record, but because we see it as very influential to the direction moving forward with this process. Some other community sentiments, however, were also that the recognition of this being really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And while there's a need to look back into the past, there's definitely an opportunity that is being recognized by different members and stakeholders within the community to really build a facility that then can also inspire and serve future generations. So there's something that we have organized as the following, as being recognizing and honoring the Chinatown's heritage, but also acknowledging and manifesting its community contributions at large. But also the building is meant to ignite and reconcile like a healing process and spur economic activity locally in Chinatown. And something else that we also want to just bring up, because it was also quite, or we want to acknowledge the skepticism and mistrust and frustration that was very present throughout the process as well. And that was fueled by a very deep felt sense of like long-term lack of investment and public support of the Chinatown community, and also reinforced currently by the ongoing health crisis and its economic repercussions within the community. With that, I'm going to speak a little bit more to the role, that the findings of the role. Again, just as a reminder, we are currently going over the findings. We are not in the section of recommendations yet. So this is really just like feeding back what we have heard and what we have learned over the past few months from you, and also what came in through the survey data. So again, on the survey, some of in response to the question of like some of the values that are being associated with the 70 Mulberry Street building, there was a very clear and strong value that over all the other values kind of came out as the priority and top value, which is community. And it was more than 71.7% that have chosen the community as like the top priority value associated with the building. And again, we tried through the different meetings to dig a little bit deeper into like what is the understanding of community in this context. So the community members perceived also the building as a layered with multiple experiences of the old as well as of the young, the immigrant, and the multi-generational Asian Americans. And as such, we also heard respondents desiring a dual function of the space moving forward, that on the one side allows for social interaction between different ethnicities, but also serves as a resource aggregator for the broader Asian American community within New York, but also the US. Another aspect of that is that the many different people that are either receiving already the services, so the service recipients of the current tenants, as well as like former alumni from the old school that used to be housed within 70 Mulberry Street, really experience an immersion of Asian American history and culture and a sense of belonging within the community. And it has been emphasized multiple times, not just through the meetings, but as well through the survey, that the importance of like regaining that community is the utmost priority of the rebuilding process moving forward, and the function that the building is going to serve in the future. And there's a few aspects that we do want to pull out here. One is around like the new building, but an old spirit. So the building, we all know, has a very long-standing past, and it's seeking for its future to balance out this past and the future by memorializing and continuing the old public school, but also service center community spirit like into the future. So that will be a bridge between the past and the future that we hope the future site will be able to manage. The other is the uniting of the old and the young. It's something that has been very present throughout the different meetings. So really the creation within this building of a space that allows for the younger as well as the older generations to meet and to learn from one another, which ties into a very strong ask for like a continuation of the learning legacy of the building, because currently that's kind of space is still missing in Chinatown. So it was really seen as an opportunity to create that space within 70 Mulberry Street in the future. Heritage was the second value, like that was chosen from the survey. So 39.6% of the respondents to the surveys ranked this value, heritage, as the second most associated value with 70 Mulberry Street. And the community therefore widely really understands the building as very central to Chinatown, but also to New York City and Asian culture and heritage in general. And there's different aspects that we have also wanted to highlight around that. So one is the heritage itself. So there's an opportunity here that emerges for the building to really play a role in the future of bridging cross cultures with the larger Asian American community and serving as a center of cultural education for the young. But again, also there's a strong emphasis on like continuing this educational legacy of the building. So from like being a school in the past to what could it be in the future. So with the main and central aspect on learning. Then cultural heritage, again, we were unpacking that a little bit more throughout the meetings. So we see the building also as an opportunity in the future of the building to really develop the Asian American consciousness more through a range of different kind of programmings that are being offered at the building. And there's a very broad-based alignment on the need to preserve Asian American culture. However, there's also different facets of the identity to be explored, like there's a Chinese American, Asian American, and immigrants New York identity that the building is meant to encompass in the future. And with that, I will pass it back over also to Priyanka to continue with the findings, not yet the recommendations of the visioning process.
Thanks, Isabella. And I will respond to the chat messages after I'm done with my part of the presentation, but feel free to direct your messages to Isabella while I'm doing that. Besides the role of 70 Mulberry Street, the second aspect that we were looking at was building design considerations. Go to the next slide. It's not, there's a strip, Isabella, it's not showing. Okay, full slide.
Okay, I can't, so just a note, I won't be able to respond to the chat messages right now, because if I'm sharing my screen, I can't actually do that.
No worries.
Just 1 second. Okay.
Thank you, and sorry for that technical glitch. I don't think any Zoom meeting goes without it. Not surprisingly, majority of the participants desire a multi-purpose community space. I think for all of you who attended the meetings, you heard it again and again and again. And we also saw it in the survey. We heard it again and again during the community meetings. There was a general disagreement with the idea of building as a suitable site for affordable housing, despite an acknowledgement that Chinatown needs affordable housing. Next. The majority of the participants also strongly agreed that this building should represent a cultural landmark and should be set in context. Whether it be a cultural landmark, a hub of Asian American heritage, or whether it's to bring the community together, or it being related to it reflecting Chinatown culture in the design and architecture of the building. So in all its aspects, there was a very strong desire for it to be connected to the context of the community, of the neighborhood, and of the people who have been part of this building. There was also a strong desire for some local organizations to be part of this process. So some organizations had a desire to plug in their on-the-ground expertise and their understanding of the immediate needs of the neighborhoods. And if feasible, there was also a desire to have an architect or contractor who understands the culture. Next. There was also a very urgent need for an expedited preservation assessment to determine what can be restored. And that also came through the survey responses. There was a desire to be able to preserve the structurally safe parts of the building that might be identified through a preservation assessment. And there was a desire for the shell of the building to be preserved as well. Next. While there was a desire to restore the exterior and also like some aspects, like some memories and like intangible aspects of the building, there was almost a unanimous agreement that the interior should be modern, that the space inside should be redesigned so that it could adapt to the diverse need of the community, but also is flexible for future use and has future technology integrated in it. And you can see like in the survey scale, you see a very strong agreement on that aspect. Next. There was also a strong disagreement. If you see, most of the people said they do not want a ULUP process, and they do not want a taller building if that's on the cost of a ULUP process that will make the process lengthy. And this goes back to what Isabella said, time is of essence, and that being the first aspect, but also that a taller building would have potential negative impacts on the neighborhood because it wouldn't be set in the context. Next. So as far as height is concerned, most of the participants agreed that maximize as of right zoning as much as you can, but let's not go into a ULUP process. That would give additional floors, but also keep the building within the height where it is still set in context. The third aspect that we were looking at service offerings and programming. You go next. You see that it aligns very well with the values that the participant had chosen in the survey as well. Cultural and arts and community services were among the top 2 preferences for service and programming. Go next. And there was, when it comes to like needs and the kind of facilities that could sit within these programming was a very strong desire for a multi-purpose space. So a space that can adapt to needs of different groups, whether they are community groups, a cultural group, or art groups. The idea was that it moves and it adapts and it's flexible to whatever their need might be, but also with it, it becomes a cultural hub. And as far as cultural hub was concerned, many things were listed. There was a desire for an opera theater, a performance center, artist support through exhibition space. And as far as community services are concerned, it leaned more towards the learning aspect. So a language training center, a human service center, a resource aggregator, and independent library. Go next. But all in all, this multi-purpose space, the aim was to bring the community together and provide a nurturing environment. And so for that to be facilitated, there was a desire to have it supported by digital technology. So the engineering of the building should take that into aspect, and it should be set for the future, but also that it's adaptable, like I said before, to different programming. So what would make that possible is a column-free space that can accommodate diverse range of programs, and also a community-led management for that shared space. So whatever that shared community space would be, how can there be a different management structure for it? Among the cultural and recreational facilities, as I mentioned before, there was a desire for a performance center. We heard a lot of times Cantonese opera, particularly, that can support both local artists and adequate, also provide some space that meets the standards of global artists who might be invited. An independent library that records and make accessible rare artifacts and books that are not accepted by the public libraries, and a gymnasium that supports programming that's already offered by one of the association. Next. I think I do want to, before we move into recommendations, I do want to say that because this presentation is short, we just gave you a very short snapshot of what the findings are. If you access the report, all the findings are mentioned in detail, supported by quotes and the data from the survey, and have been delved into much deeper details. With that, I'll pass it on to Isabella, who will take us through the recommendations.
Thank you. Yes, so we are moving into the recommendations that we are making concretely forward for the future of the sites. We will start by introducing 4 guiding principles that we see core to the process moving forward, that should guide all the decision-making moving forward from the city and be an integral element to the process. And we are moving on then with some concrete recommendations into the different programming scenarios, as well as the design scenarios for the building. And as part of the guiding principles, as I just mentioned, we see them as really core to the city approaching the process moving forward to the implementation of the rebuilding of 70 Mulberry Street. And as something that has been mentioned already, it's really one of the core principles is time. So any decision taken should prioritize speedy reconstruction and expediency of return of the tenants. So they can resume programming for those service recipients, but also to address some of the concerns around potential like loss of funds, reappropriation of funds due to political priorities. We also have, okay, we are having someone draw on the board. But we also recommend highly that local elected officials should continue to advocate for the continued appropriation of funds to ensure that the future of 70 Mulberry remains a public priority into the next administration in New York City. The second core principle that we are seeing is the protection of cultural commons and heritage. So something that has been very clear throughout this process is really the aspect of 70 Mulberry Street represents with its offerings, with its tenants, with the different services, with its history, a cultural common and heritage of Chinatown. So any decisions that should be made in the future should consider this as really like the opportunity to preserve that cultural common that is represented by 70 Mulberry Street. The third aspect is like the community-centered role. 70 Mulberry Street's community is the most vital assets to its future, and its protection should be paramount. What that means is like interests of these groups should be taken into close consideration and may remain really integral to any future schematics or decisions related to the rebuilding efforts. We have also, again, I do want to defer also to the report and the full report. There's much more concrete information around what this could look like, but this should really include and take into consideration ownership. So for 70 Mulberry Street to remain in public ownership, but also in consideration for any decisions being made around the architecture, construction, and interior design, management of the building, as well as programming and service delivery aspects. And the fourth principle or guiding principle that we see is like a cultivation of learning and supportive environment, since it's come out as such a strong value to the building itself. We see in the continuation of the educational legacy of the building, 70 Mulberry should address the needs of the immigrant community and offer programming that supports the development of language, digital, workforce, and development skills. Programming, so we explored different programmatic opportunities, and as we have shared through the findings, the utmost priorities when it comes to services being offered and programs being offered through the building is culture and the arts, as well as community services that really surface as the most demanded services within the community. And as such, the rebuilding of the 70 Mulberry Street should serve as an opportunity to, on one side, really improve the conditions for the existing tenants, but also explore and build the foundation for an expansion of cultural, artistic, and community services and programs. So what that means is like looking into the current space for the current tenants and make the necessary adjustments so they they meet the emergent needs and standards, but also the rebuilding process should include the identification and creation of new space with the building that provides the greatest flexibility to serve the diversity of needs that reside or that have come out of this process as well. And the creation of a common performance space in particular should be taken into consideration given its demand across the community. Within that, we have also made concrete suggestions around the integration of a welcome center, as this is something also that has been voiced very strongly through the community. So a welcome center that is very well lit, that has an entrance like in the lobby that draws visitors and integrates into a series of different kind of spaces designed to provide an informative and immersive experience. We see several aspects to this welcome center that we would recommend to include, which is the visitor information center. So a center that really provides information, on different tickets and events that are going on and happening within the building, but also the information that could extend into the gallery and exhibition stage with a small retail or coffee to encourage visitors to linger and engage with the different art installations. Something else that we see feasible within that scenario of including a welcome center as a resource aggregator, and it's also been something that has been demanded, which is a community resource finder that can be installed at the welcome center to provide easy access to resources, community programs and services offered at 70 Mulberry Street, as well as other facilities within Chinatown. Then another opportunity that we see in integrating in this welcome center is an independent library, given feasibility, but we see 70 Mulberry Street could really host an independent library that focuses, and contrary to other public libraries, on like the accessibility of artifacts, books that are usually not commonly included in public libraries. So as such, the library should offer resources and information on the education programs available in the building that can improve the skills of newly arrived immigrants, as well as others of the community. Another consideration that I've mentioned before is really looking at the adaptation of the interiors to the state-of-the-art standards, which will allow for existing and potentially new tenants to adapt the offerings to the needs and serve it through the visioning process. So this is, we see as one of the priorities to really create a space and an additional space. So not just work with the space that used to be there, but aim for achieving additional space that is flexible and adaptable and affordable and has extended opening hours. So concepts that we're looking for concepts that maximize the space flexibility to expand space use to the greatest extent possible should be prioritized around different decisions. The other that we see is programming operations that allow for community space to be really comfortable, affordable, and open at the weekend as well as on the evenings. And something else, another aspect of the multi-purpose and adaptable use that we want to highlight through the recommendations is the fostering and healing, like fostering of a space for healing through multi-generational programming. So an emphasis of the programmatic opportunities that are expressed through a range of activities that encourage community participation, as well as stimulate increased activity and interest in Chinatown and bring young people as well as seniors together in one space. But young people should also be able to learn about the Asian American culture and unite with the older population of the groups to heal trauma caused by xenophobia and racism. And as Priyanka already mentioned, the recommendation goes for really the inclusion of digital technology throughout the building, include electric and technological plan that allows the space to support modern technologies with the capacity for adaptive responses to emergent and future technologies. And as we have mentioned earlier too, there is a clear preference for this space to become a community and arts and culture space. So we have several aspects that we have identified around that space that we see feasible within that scenario. One of them is around access from amongst diverse cultural groups. So in the integration, or like when you think through that kind of space of a management or like system that allows shared space for rehearsals, productions, and performance, so that all different kind of groups can actually access the space and use the space for their purposes. We see the integration of an exhibition and event space, so a space to accommodate rotating expeditions as well as large events for community gatherings or bookings. The space should in that way also have an uninterrupted wall surfaces for displays. And we also see the opportunity for the integration of a community theater. So while a lot of participants didn't see the feasibility of for 70 Mulberry Street to be an ideal venue for a large performance center, many saw an opportunity around creating a so-called black box theater, a small venue for rehearsal theater with a supporting makerspace for production dedicated for for storage, dressing rooms, and backstage circulation. So the two other aspects that we would want to highlight within the community arts and culture space is also an indoor gymnasium in support of the service recipients of the Eastern Athletic Association, because currently service recipients have to travel to different boards to access different courts. And the other aspect that was highlighted through the meetings, and that is part of our recommendations, is the inclusion of a makers and collaboration space as part of the new space within the building. And with that, I'm handing it back over to Priyanka to talk more about the different recommendations on the actual building design.
Thanks, Isabella. Just as a note, because I see that as a repeated question, this meeting recording would be available on DCAS website. The report is already there on DCAS website. It was released today. And we'll try to get this presentation deck on the website as well. Next slide. As far as preservation is concerned, there was a desire to prioritize it while maximizing FAR within as of right. I think that came through the findings. And while the community wanted existing structures should be preserved, the previous demolished spaces should be rebuilt to a state-of-the-art level with an emphasis on tenant needs and flexibility. And that's what we're recommending, is to gain as much space as possible under as of right, but also to be determined by a preservation assessment and make it flexible, so that it could fill the needs of the Chinatown community as a whole. We are also recommending that the future management of the building should identify opportunities to memorialize the rich immigrant history and legacy of PS23. There are different ideas and strategies. It could include an exhibition in the reception area, or an art installation in the lobby, or the wayfinding system itself could relate to the memories of the people in different spaces. And we recommend highly that being a tactic. Next. One of the most critical areas of tension that surfaced was that how much of or to what extent the building should be preserved. And a comprehensive preservation assessment should be taken into account is not under question, but there are different aspects of that preservation assessment. So the way we are recommending it is the foundation should be assessed to determine whether it can be restored and support the weight of the reconstruction and additional flows. The preservation assessment should determine how much of these stone facades can be salvaged, as well as the associated cost with it. There was a strong desire of the community to have cost analysis as well. And there is a desire for the continuity of the stone facade, so we do highly recommend that. And then in addition to that, if there are additional historic architectural components that can be restored, that should also be determined. If not, there should be recommendations for appropriate handling and disposition of those elements that cannot be restored. Next. As we have said it again and again, the modern interiors is a unanimous agreement, but there is an opportunity for improved space management. So how can the interior space can be reconfigured to maximize its use by tenants, but also other cultural nonprofit groups, And so to the extent possible, can the floors be made columnless? There was also a desire to maintain high ceiling heights for certain usage. So to the extent possible, we're also recommending to retain that high ceiling height on certain floors so that it can accommodate the needs of the tenants and other cultural groups that might need to utilize it for displays and installation. Go back. And have considerations for advanced communication technology, soundproofing, given that most of the usage of the building is cultural, and consideration should be given to ease and mobility solutions that go beyond just meeting standard ADA requirements. Next. We are also recommending, as we mentioned before, to humanize the scale of the building and determine a height between 8 and 12 floors as determined or as feasible per the determination of the preservation assessment, and avoid going through a ULUP process as it would slow the overall construction timeline. And for the construction management, to keep in mind and find strategies to mitigate the negative impact of it on local businesses. Next. This is a very, very rough sketch. Please do not take it as a drawing. It's very thematic, and its feasibility definitely needs to be determined by technical experts. But the idea is that the basement be used as community theater. There is possibility for additional coverage in the courtyard. If that happens, a welcome center that Isabella talked to before would be a great addition. Original tenants be provided the space as they had, like the square feet that they had, and that they have their management structure with DCAS under the existing policies. And then whatever additional space could be available within as of right, and per the assessment, there be multi-purpose community space and make a studio exhibition space in there. And for those, like some shared spaces, we recommend a more community-centric governance. Next. I think for the community space management, we have laid out that there should be guidelines for community space usage and maintenance, and that equitable access should be ensured. But options to implement such a management models are vast, and it will require DCAS to further assess and find a structure that is in alignment with its current policies. And to conclude, if you go to the next slide, Isabella, I think the legacy of 70 Mulberry Street is really in its role as a repository of collective memory, but also its function as a transformational space for individuals who are seeking to forge and maintain a sense of community identity and belonging. The building is at a turning point now. So if it is rebuilt with the commitment to community accessibility and heritage, it will continue to host, as it has in the past, a range of valuable cultural and social services, and provide a nurturing social agency and support meaningful collections across generations. I think it's important that first and foremost, it gives priority to those small organizations that do not make the cut of the large number of cultural institutions that exist in downtown. 70 Mulberry Street was humble to begin with, and that humbleness and that community centricity should remain in its legacy and should continue onwards for its future journey as well. With that, I will pass it to Quinton, who will take us through some of the next steps, and then we'll open it to Q&A.
So thanks, Priyanka, for the presentation, Isabella. So just wanted to flag a couple of next steps that we have in line. So as Priyanka had mentioned, we'll also put it in the chat, but it's up here on the screen. The final report is actually available now on DCAS's website. And so what we are also asking, because this is the first time we are publicly putting the report out, as we put it on the website today, if you do have comments, we're asking that you email them to us by January 8th. If you have any comments in regards to the report or any other additional questions that are not answered tonight, we have set up both the website and an email address that you can reach us at. We'll respond to those questions appropriately. The email address is as shown on the screen, 70mulberry@dcas.nyc.gov. Again, 70mulberry@dcas.nyc.gov. We have created a short link for the website. On the website, you can find all the previous recordings, all of the assessment reports that have been done thus far. They are now posted on the website. All the press release, all of the videos are currently uploaded to there. We'll also put this video on there in the days to come, as well as this presentation. So we are going to use this website as the hub for all the information that is publicly available to the community so that you can have it all in one place. I know we have sent out various different links, but again, this is the website that will have all of your information. Again, it's www.nyc.gov/70mulberry, and that is live as we speak. The next step that we are currently in is DCAS is going to do and find and hire a vendor to do a preservation assessment. We are currently in the procurement phase of that. We hope to start that assessment in January, and so we are in the midst of the procurement of that right now. And we will provide a formal update. The next time we'll be able to provide a formal update to the community will be at the Community Board 3 Land Use, Zoning, and Public-Private Housing Committee meeting, which is scheduled in February. And so at that point, we will hopefully have a better update on the preservation assessment. We are working very diligently to get a vendor procured, and so we can start that immediately, so that will inform what of the building can be preserved, and it'll also influence and help us write the scope for the next step in the process. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Priyanka so we can go into the Q&A session.
Feel free, I can take some questions from the chat to begin with, but also feel free to raise your hands. For those of you who are not able to raise their hands through Zoom, feel free to type your questions in the chat. With that, Shirley, would you want to speak?
My question to Quentin is that you're going to hire a person to do just the preservation assessment, but when you look at a building, can't you look at it from a holistic point of view? Because then are we doing everything in small sequential steps versus hiring one design engineering consultant to look at the building from a macroscopic view? So let's say we can look at the foundations, the historic preservations, bubble diagrams for space allocations. I'm just trying to understand the process. It seems like it's very serial, which will take it longer versus a more multi-lined approach, a more multitasking approach.
So thanks for that, Shirley. And so we've already done a structural assessment of the building. That is actually, the assessment is actually posted on the website. And so that's currently there, that did a foundational assessment of the building. What was not done during that engagement was the preservation assessment. We were waiting until post this visioning process to procure that vendor. And so now we are doing the preservation assessment of that. But we have already done a structural assessment of the building, and that report by Leroy and Associates was posted, and they actually presented to the community on that as well.
But then when do you actually hire the, I'll call it the architect or engineering team that's actually going through to, I'll call it design the replacement? Yep. Because is that part of, you're gonna have somebody else to write the RFP for that also? Or how's that work?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is after the preservation assessment, we'll get a better understanding of what actually in the building can be preserved. And through that, also looking at this report, we'll then write the scope and RFP for the design firm that will then design the building.
Who's actually doing the writing of the RFP?
The city will. So our in-house, both procurement and architects will be writing the RFP.
Will we have any input into that?
Of course, yes. So my next update at the community land use meeting will provide next steps on how the community can stay engaged with that process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Vic, would you want to go next?
Let me see how, wait a second, let's see. Okay. I mean, one of the problems that we've had in terms of the process is when the determination to tear down the third and fourth floors. I mean, we flew a drone over there, and you know, the building was structurally sound, it had steel beams, and of course you have, your city has its experts and consultants. They made the decision very quickly. Until we started demonstrating to slow the process down, 3 floors were gone at a cost of $6 million. Now, if there was a process where we could have looked at it, had a second opinion, where the community has an opinion or has experts to, obviously the city has its own agenda. We don't know what it is, but one thing is certain, Chinatown is dying. Between the pandemic, the fire, xenophobia, we're at our knees, and Chinatown needs the city to keep its promise, because we will not allow the city to bogart this building. And I guarantee you, we'll hold you all accountable. The next mayor who comes, because we know de Blasio is out, he's gone. That promise for $80 million, unless we spend it within his administration, it's not going to be there. So let's be frank and stop the BS. Excuse my language. Where is the transparency? When is the community going to be able to have input in all these processes and decisions that are being made that you act upon before we even have a chance to even think about it? You are moving so fast. Why? Anybody have an answer for me?
Lena, I don't have an answer directly to Vic, but I just want to make a comment based on the presenters' shared information. I want to thank the hard work behind that. I'm a parent whose children are enrolled with UEAA for soccer. My husband loves the club, and so do we. I'm personally enrolled in their yoga program. Very, very earnest and hardworking team, offering a very diverse program for children and grown-ups to really immerse ourselves in the culture and to really bond and grow as a community. So when this happened, it's a tragedy to all. And I think one of the main oversights in the presentation is the impact. The current impact is not addressed. Is there any provision for an interim solution to house the tenants who are displaced? And if that is addressed, I think the advisory committee can take your time to work out and iron out the kinks. But the immediate required solution is to address the need for space, the need for a roof overhead, so that they can carry on what they have been doing and doing extremely well. And I hope 3x3 can look into that, because it will also give your space and time to do a really good job and not be rushed or not be bullied into being told that you're too slow or too fast. You need to understand that it's a community of people who have a lot of pride and a lot of people to answer to, like my children. When will they get to resume lion dance, dragon boat, swimming classes, for me, yoga and soccer? It may seem very low in priority to the city council, but as a community, we can actually raise it as a priority that there are people who are expecting answers. I think it's it's coming to a year, and we don't know who caused the fire, but I have a feeling that by the time 3x3 is done with your reports and your analysis, my kids are in middle school. And it would be a shame to miss out on all the programs that Chen Dance School and DEAA athletic professionals can offer my kids in the year and the next 2 years to come. I mean, my background is project management. So I think what will really help in your presentation is a timeline with deliverables that are tagged with people who are accountable. And a very good example in New York City is Essex Street Market. You should look into the dedicated website. They also have an agency that plotted all the deliverables based on the budget that's awarded to the team and the people who are responsible for delivering the milestones or updating the website. And then you can be fed from the nitty-gritty yet important answers which are required of you.
With respect to the folks on the call, I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions, so if we could move on to the next one.
Yeah, but I agree with Vic that the eyes are on the team 3x3, and my last point is please take a look at Essex Street Market, how it's done when after like more than 10 years of displacement of the residents in the Lower East Side, finally a team is deployed and proper work is done so that the people who need to be compensated and to recover from the loss and the tragedy are adequately treated.
Right. Thanks for your feedback, Lena. Just to address the topic of space for nonprofits, that was the highest priority of DCAS to begin with. I think that Quentin spoke to the specific topic, but I think that was a given before the community process started, and tenants were a part of the advisory committee. We worked in hand with them throughout this whole process. DCAS, Quentin, would you want to speak to that?
So I couldn't hear you. I think we're talking in the chat too. We couldn't hear a lot of what Lena had mentioned, and then kind of Priyanka, I think there was a lot of audio feedback when you were speaking, so I'm not sure if folks heard it.
Yeah, I think the question is addressed, and I see it being asked again in the chat as well, is a temporary space for nonprofits. And what I said was that was a priority to begin with. Maybe you want to expand on that?
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Leah. I did catch a lot bits and pieces of what you're saying, but if the bulk of it was about temporary space for the tenants. So the tenants were are a part of the advisory committee. And one of the things that we initially did was work with them to try to find spaces, some of which they were able to find spaces on their own, working with other community nonprofits. Those tenants that were unable to do that, we tried to work with them to find other city-owned space, specifically within the Chinatown community. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of open space that the city owns that's in the Chinatown community in respect to that was vacant that we could actually house some of the tenants in. I have spoken directly with Echo Wong on space for United East Athletic Association. We have provided a space for them. I know that right now you guys are not currently don't have activities given the pandemic that's going on right now, but we are in contact and we're working through that, and we're seeing if there's some hours of operation logistics that we can work out. But as of right now, we have a identified space that could be utilized. We're just making sure that it makes sense and it works for United East Athletic Association and HT Chen dancers. But again, we worked as hard as we can to really identify the space. There just is not a lot of space that is directly within Chinatown that is vacant so that we could place some of the tenants in to continue those services, but we are working diligently to address that.
Mm-hmm. And then Richard, do you want to go next?
Yes, hi, thank you. This is for Mr. Haynes specifically. There's a lot of concern about the qualifications of the preservation assessment consultant, as well as ultimately the architect for the reconstruction. And one thing that we would recommend, and I'd like to hear your reaction to, is expanding the advisory committee to include community groups and community experts that could put input into this part of the process directly, so that there's an assurance that the most suitable team is picked.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Richard. I did hear that and have been in touch with a couple other community stakeholders about trying to expand the advisory committee. We are considering that and seeing what that would look like and the roles in which and how folks may potentially be selected to be put on that advisory committee, whether it is the actual advisory committee itself or whether it's forming an ad hoc committee that is specifically advising on design or construction. And so I take that feedback and would love to follow up with you offline if you have any other ideas specifically around scope and qualifications. So happy to follow up with you on that.
Okay, great. And just one point I wanted to make was that there was discussion tonight about preserving the stone base, but I think it's important to also include that most people were very much supportive of retaining the existing historic brickwork on the exterior facades as well, which includes the tower and the remaining story above the stone.
Yeah, so in the findings, we did hear a lot of community stakeholders say that they would like to preserve both the brick. Some folks who said that they would be, if the brick or the facade or the stone could not be preserved, if the construction, the design and construction could be to mirror what it looks like so that the end product would have the same look and feel as it does currently. And so again, the preservation assessment is going to tell us the condition of the brick and stone and whether that could be preserved. Some of it may be able to preserve, some of it may not. And for what I'm saying is what can't be preserved, I think the next step for us is to find a way to at least make sure that the look and feel remains or is preserved. And so, we'll see when we get the feedback from the preservation assessment, but I totally hear you, and we are committed to that. We want to make sure that the new building is of the same aesthetics as the rest that it currently is. We don't want it to change, or we don't want it to be this island of itself. It's been heard loud and clear from the community that they want to preserve that look and feel. And so we're going to do the best we can to ensure that that's there.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Echo, would you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. This is Echo Wong from United Youth Athletic Association. And
hi, Echo.
Hi, Quentin. I would like to talk about temporary space for nonprofits. We're a small nonprofit. We have no funding. We are all volunteers. DCAS has been very nice, been working with us over the course of the last many months to try to find us a space. However, most of these city buildings, according to Quentin, that they don't open after 5. And all our programs are weekend programs. We have very little daytime programs since everybody works, and we volunteer in the evening. We teach English, we teach cultural programs. On weekends, we provide free programs for the kids. It's almost a year since the fire. We have planned to resume our program before the COVID cases spike again. But to this day, we cannot afford renting from other space, and we don't have a space. City set aside a space for us that is not being utilized because we can provide programs between 9 to 5. I know a lot of the community people who are attending tonight's sessions have been advocated for us, and we appreciate that, and we need the city to help us to find a space that we can operate our programs, which for many years is always in the evenings and on weekends.
Yeah, and Echo, I empathize with you and working diligently to see what solutions are out there. you are right in stating that a majority of DCAS's portfolio and property are office buildings, and our office buildings are not open generally past the hours of the workday. And so when you look at that, we are also looking at, one, we're in a pandemic, so majority of our buildings are closed to the public unless essential services. So that's kind of the space that we're in right now. But even looking forward, as you start to think about what that could look like, prayerfully, vaccine is here. We're all kind of turning the corner on this virus, and things start to open up when you start to get into the summer and the fall. We will have to think through what is possible. Again, we operate office buildings, and so it's very hard. 70 Mulberry was a unique building where we were able to have the hours of operation open a lot longer. But when you think about our office buildings, you have to have custodial staff there, you have to have management staff there, you have to have engineers, building engineers, you have to have security there. All of those things have to take place in order for us to be or have the building open. And so, like I said, I will stay in contact with you. We'll see what is possible. And that's what I can commit to at this point.
I'll take some questions in the chat before I go back to the participants who raised their hands. Robert Lee says, management of the building once it's operating is a question. I imagine this will not be the city staff, but an independent organization or somehow under contract to the city, but have its role and working processes be overseen by the community's direct and constant input. Are plans underway for how this will function? We have given certain ideas, and it's there in the report to DCAS, and DCAS will be taking it under further assessment, if that answers your question, Robert. Again, thank you for the report back, 3x3. I personally felt heard through your process. Since this is the end of your contract, will DCAS be taking over the community engagement process, or will another community facilitator be contracted? The community engagement process has been a lot smoother after 3x3's involvement. Before 3x3 came into the project, the direct interface with DCAS was pretty rough, as it is not part of their expertise. Again, the scope of 3x3 has ended. We have given certain ideas for DCAS to be able to continue some engagement within its capacity. DCAS come with full realization that it is not part of their expertise and are thinking of multiple options to be able to continue engagement with the community.
Do you want me to respond to your reading my question?
Sure, Robert.
So it sounds like, maybe I'm not getting this clear, but you are thinking about these things. But, is there any more concrete details that we can understand how you project the management of the building will function?
We have provided the principles with which it should operate, and that was in the slide deck, and as also mentioned a little more detail in the report. But I'll let Quentin address how they would be taking it under further assessment to develop it later.
Sure, thanks for the question, Robert. And so what we're looking at now, and again, we are internalizing a lot of what has been throughout this community engagement process. And so there is some thought process still to go as we think through the kind of governance structure. But we do not see at this point a deviation of what is currently in place for the 70 Mulberry. And that is where the city does provide space for nonprofit tenants, and we lease out that space to the nonprofit tenants. What is currently not in the 70 Mulberry building or kind of governance structure is how we would manage a communal space. And so a lot of what we've heard from the community is that there is a need for a multi-purpose shared space. How will that be managed? We have not thought that through yet. Currently, right now, we don't have a model where we hire a nonprofit to come in and run the space and still have control over it. A majority of the way the city normally does this process is that we would contract out the entire space or portfolio building, and then that nonprofit, that organization would have total control over the entire building. And so that's not something that we are looking directly or directly fits in with 70 Mulberry as it currently stands. And so we still need to do a little bit of thinking on that. Robert, I would welcome any thoughts that you have or suggestions or feedback that you would have on what that could look like, if you have any. But as of right now, we don't have an immediate way forward on that.
For the reception area, for example, or some people talked about the entrance area where some kind of a exhibition area is also connected. So you might consider that that is part of the public or shared space that you're talking about. And I don't know, I'm wondering whether some kind of community advisory board would enable the city to take their recommendations, aside from all this material that we've already suggested to you, for the actual day-to-day logistics on, say, a group coming in and renting the performance space or renting the exhibition space or showing a film. I wonder whether, like you said, you have a model functioning in the city in which the management for some kind of shared space would be able to take from a advisory board the way in which it would function, particularly when it comes down to day-to-day daily uses and changes and, you know, complaints and all these kinds of things. It can get very hairy if there's not someone on site who is the day-to-day manager. So, you know, we can talk about this another time, but I think that it needs some thought.
Understood, and thank you for that feedback. I think that is something that we have on the list to kind of consider. I think we first have to get kind of through design and construction before we kind of start to get too deep in how the actual operations of the building are going to be made. But I totally agree with your points, and thank you for the feedback.
Michelle, would you want?
All right, can we go back to my question? I think we kind of glazed over it. I understand it's the end of your contract, Priyanka, and Isabel, you've done a great job. And so I guess the question is more to Quentin. Now that you don't have the 3x3 team with you, how are you going to be interacting with the community, and what's the plan to secure either another consulting agency to help, or what's the plan to actually do engagement with our neighborhood?
So our the next step will be is that once we kind of get through the preservation kind of phase, we'll report that out to the community. But our idea as of now is to really be on a standing agenda item for the community land use, Community Board 3 land use meeting, to provide updates in that way. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and then also kind of after 3x3 went through their findings, is one of the biggest thing that we're now doing is also we have a website that we're going to keep updated with all the information so that the community can keep involved of everything that's going on with the site, but also an email address that we're setting up so that we can have an active conversation. But what our thought process is to really be engaged at each of the major milestones. So that is the pre-design phase, post-preservation assessment, that is the design phase, and seeing how we can engage with the community to make sure that your thoughts and concerns are present there. And then it's also updating and engaging with the community on the construction and post operations of the building. And so there are ways in which we're going to do that. I won't say that we have it all figured out, open to suggestions, open to feedback as always on how we can get that done. But as of right now, there is not a decision that has been made to hire another consultant to usher us through this process. And so I hope that answers your question or gives you some insight to our thinking now.
Okay, just some feedback, right? I think everyone can agree that the early CB3 land use meetings were quite painful to go through and weren't as well managed because it's not in their wheelhouse. It's a lot of work to be putting on to this committee of volunteers to do this really important community engagement work. And I'm really afraid that a lot of important work that needs to be done is not going to be done, or actually can be hurtful to the community if this process is not well ran. It can lead to some difficult, disagreements. So I really push for professionals such as 3x3 to be a part of the process. And another thing I heard in the previous sessions is that an idea for a mailing list. So for DCAS or the consultants to not only just have the web page, which I'm glad you guys heard that and have started this web page, but to, whenever there are updates, to email out to people who have already signed up, who are here tonight. You have our info already. Alert us. Don't put the work on us, right? Like, give us the heads up when things are happening. And just two more points really quickly, as also thinking about the construction site of 70 Mulberry in relation to two other sites that are really nearby, right? So that's the 125 White Street in planning, and the mega jail, and also this potential hotel site at 62 Mulberry. I think we really need to think about our neighborhood holistically and see what 3 construction site means. And also come to terms with the fact that these construction hoardings are going to be up for years, these green walls that have been surrounding our neighborhood. And, as Vic pointed out earlier, we're really suffering in the neighborhood, and we can take this opportunity to start enlivening our streets with art, with ways to support these 5 nonprofits there, with bulletin boards, with artful ways to enliven our streets. So those are other 2 more points I wanted to put in.
Yeah, so I I really appreciate that. I do hear you loud and clear on the construction piece. I understand the sentiment around that, and I think that as we start to get into that, we are a little bit of ways out from construction, but I think that that's a good point. And we will definitely take that under consideration as we get into both the timeline, how we are planning construction, but also how we're notifying the surrounding area of the impact of the construction. So thank you for that feedback.
And I hope we can do something artful with the construction hoardings, as it's such a great opportunity for that corner that's really hurting.
Definitely.
Mr. Grappler?
Yeah, I've been participating in this whole process and listening tonight. And one thing that I think everyone can agree on is that 70 Mulberry is a historic building. And in another context, I heard from the DCAS commissioner to say that there is an Office of Historic Preservation within DCAS, I believe headed by Jeremy Woodruff, or at least he's involved in that office. And yet I haven't heard that mentioned even once in this whole process. Why wouldn't the agency take advantage of an already existing office and expertise within it? And if they haven't, why don't they?
Hi, Mitchell. Good evening. I'm not sure where that comment, where you heard that comment from. I personally didn't say that there was an Office of Historic.
No, I heard it from the commissioner.
The commissioner of DCAS?
Yes.
Well, okay. I'm not sure where that where you heard that comment from. DCAS does not have a Office of Preservation Assessment or a Historic Preservation office within the agency. So that's why we are contracting that that work out to a vendor. We do not have that skill set or that expertise in-house.
Is Jeremy Woodruff part of DCAS?
I'm not familiar with that person, no.
All right, thanks.
Shirley.
Hi, I have a question about whether DCAS does design build or any other call mechanism to make it go faster. I saw that one of the Think Chinatown folks had the timeline on the chat, and it said something about like 2022 by the time we start design, and then 2024 by the time we do construction. To think 3 years to do design, that's why I was considering that the point that Yin brought up regarding the community engagement, that I don't see why DCAS can't just write an RFP that includes the historic preservation, includes the community arrangement, includes the engineering into one contract, and the programming of the tenants, so that we can kind of look at it, solving the problem from a holistically in a more faster fashion. I know that has the historic preservation been already procured, or what? That's my concern.
I can take that. So thank you, Shirley. I'm so glad that you mentioned design build. We are actually looking into design build. So yes, we are looking into that to see if that is feasible for this project. In regards to the preservation assessment, by the time we're able to get to a kind of scope of work where we would start the design process, that is months from now. And we didn't want the preservation assessment to take that long. When you think about design build, you are, as you said, you are putting everything in one. And so we are looking at that for, of course, the design and the actual construction, but we wanted to get the preservation assessment done sooner rather than later, so we understand what we're dealing with now. As you know, the procurement process is cumbersome. And so we are in talks with our other city agencies who have a lot more experience in design build than we do. And we've already started that conversation.
Why wouldn't you just go to DDC or something? I guess the question is maybe...
As you're aware, we work very closely with DDC. We're already in contact with them about this, and they're the ones who are helping us out think through if design build will work for this exact project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have someone else? I don't see any raised hands right now.
Carrie?
Hi, thank you. This is Carrie Culhane, and I'm hearing a lot of background noise from somebody else right now.
Can everyone just mute himself, because I can't identify where the background noise is coming from.
Thank you for that. Carrie,
Okay.
do you want to go now?
Thanks. Yes, I just want to reiterate something that Yin said, which is thanking 3x3 for facilitating a process that had seemed rather disorganized before you stepped into it. So it has been necessary and very appreciated to have a point of contact, somebody running the show, somebody calling the meetings. And it is extremely hard to imagine how a committee of non-professionals would be able to organize themselves into as productive a body to do the huge work that is coming forward, which is the actual planning process. So again, thank you 3x3, but please DCAS appoint someone with a professional capacity to keep this process running smoothly. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie, for your comment. Amy, would you want to go next? Amy? I'll mention some questions. Amy, let us know when you're ready. Robert?
Maybe she has to unmute herself, maybe.
Yeah, Amy, it seems she's not muted, so that wouldn't be an issue. Okay, I'm gonna just go through some of the questions in the chat. what is the projection for the exhibition area, which I might assume are for artworks? Will this set up for a local visual art nonprofit, or is the chosen option to see this as part of the shared communal space? Tied to this is a setup or storage construction area that can be shared, say when the theater group may need to build performance furniture. Robert, as part of our recommendations, we provided more thematic assignments to different floors. It would require further assessment by the DCAS architectural team to actually allocate floor area. And I think they plan to do it in alignment with the meetings that they would hold with the community board. Quentin, would you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so I'm still reading the question. So the question is basically around the communal space. Would a nonprofit be set up to run that space? Am I getting that right?
Well, the choice is like you. We have a certain number of nonprofits that already have a history in the building, and since there was often very many mentions of an exhibition space, that's what I have is a nonprofit that focuses on visual arts, but we're not as active as we used to be. And so I'm wondering whether this is seen as part of the communal space, or whether you see this as an opportunity for another nonprofit in the visual arts to come in and operate that visual arts space. Because so far it's been discussed, but not in terms of, and you've also discussed the idea that you're going to welcome a few other nonprofits. I'm getting that impression. And so I'm wondering whether how this is going to be thought through or come up to a conclusion, whether it's this direction as a communal space, or a space that's going to be seen as another, the welcoming of another nonprofit into the building.
Right. I mean, as values and principles, we have recommended that there be access for more organization, because that's the need that 70 Mulberry is very is set to fill, and that has been a need that it has filled sometimes in the future, in the past as well. So there be a rotating basis, but what would be the actual or governance structure or the management structure is something that DCAS would have to assess further to make sure that it is in alignment with its current policies as well. Quentin, would you want to expand on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes similar to your earlier question, Robert. We have yet to kind of go into the details from a thought process standpoint of what that actually could look like. We're kind of really still in the internalization phase of the report. And so now that we see that this is something that the community sees that they are saying that they want, I think our goal now, or our job now, is to try to see, is this reasonable? Is this feasible? What could it look like? What would it look like? Is it an opportunity, I think, as folks have said, to welcome another nonprofit that is focused really on kind of the cultural, historic space, internal space of designing the space inside? Is that something that is feasible, and what would that look like? So, you know, I don't have an answer for you tonight, but I do agree with you that it does require a lot more thinking through before we can kind of give you a firm answer.
And then
be in touch with me about this, and I'll try to be helpful in terms of whether you know, if there's anything that I can help you with in terms of figuring this out.
So I actually would appreciate that, Robert. Can you send me well, how about this? Can you either drop your email in the chat, and I will follow up with you directly, because it seems as though that you have a very keen interest in this space, and to be honest with you, we haven't really kind of thought this through. So I would love to be able to speak with you offline to kind of get some more of your ideas and seeing how that's possible. So if you can drop either your email in the chat or email the 70 Mulberry, and then we'll follow up with you directly.
Okay, I've done it.
Thank you much.
Then there are a couple of questions, Quentin, directed towards the schedule and the timeline. So Eric asked, can you be upfront about the projected design and construction schedule? 2024 construction allocation means you have a schedule that you're not sharing with the community. And then Fanny has a question on the timeline for the procurement phase.
So I can give you very high level of months as far as that. I don't have an actual day-by-day month timeline, but I can give you a number of months. So we're thinking about pre-design, which includes the preservation assessment, kind of writing things up of the plan of how we're going to move forward with the actual schematic design of the building. Is about 2 months. When you think about design, you're talking 12 to 14 months, and the construction, you're looking at anywhere from 24 to 30 months. And so those are very high level timelines. They're consistent with what I've reported out to the community in the past, and that hasn't changed. And so as we start to go through again, as we start to really get and figure out what are the outcome or what is the outcome from the preservation assessment, we'll start to be able to outline a time. The other thing that I would just add is that the procurement, or as I like to call the administrative side of this, of course, will add time to this. And so what we are trying to do now is we have a separate team literally working to try to figure out all of the procurement hurdles and process in place so that we're not running into any bureaucratic hurdles as we go through this process. So we're working on all cylinders. I personally am very committed to moving this along as expeditiously as possible. And so, that's the timeline that I can give to you tonight.
Priyanka, sorry, I have a question, and I can't raise my hand except to call out.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
My question is, and this is to DCAS, is there a possibility for input from the community about the procurement of the assessment engineers? Many of us are really concerned about preservation. And so far, because there has not been a preservation assessment, we are very eagerly watching this. And if 3x3 is no longer going to be helping to facilitate this process where the community speaks to you directly, and there are no other people aside from the ones that you had mentioned that are on the committee right now, I think the community really needs to feel like we have an input, some sort of communication and dialogue with the city about the procurement of these assessors.
So I believe there was a similar question. Oh, thank you. Hello, Professor Ava. Good to see you. I think to answer your question, there was an earlier question that asked about qualifications. And so one of the things that I will say is that we are open if you have recommendations on the qualifications. I would like to just say that the procurement process for the preservation assessment is an MWBE selection process. And so the way the city procures and is going through this process is where a vendor would have to be a certified city MWBE. And they would have to be registered as such and in passport, and they would have to be selected or have to acknowledge that they have the expertise or they have, we call it the commodity code, have historical preservation as selected as their commodity code. And that's what gives us the list in which we can procure from. I don't have that list right now, but I think what would be helpful is as you are saying you're watching it closely, which I hope you are, and definitely as things come up, please reach out to me, reach out to the general email box. We will be very responsive. I do want to say that I understand that there is a lot of concern about the community engagement moving forward. I will say I too thank 3x3 for coming in and really helping us out with that. We were very upfront that was a challenge for us, and that's why we hired 3x3. And so we did acknowledge that we weren't kind of speaking on the same page with the community at the initial side of this. And we brought 3x3 in really to better hear and kind of deepen our ties. I think now that we've had that, we're ready and willing to step in and be that conduit between the community and listen to what you're saying, but also be very honest and transparent with you with what is feasible, where we're at, the status of the procurements, what we're considering in the procurements, how we share the scopes of work. If you have feedback directly to us on qualifications that you would like to see, we'll be transparent in whether we can include those qualifications or not. And so I'm going off on different things, but all that to say is, if you do have recommendations outside of kind of the selection of the vendor, such as qualifications, requirements, things that we should be looking for, please let us know. I'm happy to look that over. I'm happy to talk to you offline if you want to talk to me offline about it. And that's what I can offer you. It's just literally an open line of communication to hear what are your concerns.
Teresa, would you want to go next?
Did that? Sorry, I want to go back to did that, because I think you were on mute when you were saying. Did that address your question? I wanted to make sure.
I think that definitely us community members giving you feedback about people that might be able to help and meet these qualifications is a good thing, but I think community members still feel like we're in the dark about things. And so if you put more community members, open up the committee to more community members, that would go a long way. But also I think that, having this process, this particular process about the assessment, be more transparent so that more architects who are out there and who are on the call know that they can, apply for this would be enormously helpful.
Thank you for that. So what I am going to say is I'm going to follow up with you directly to ask you a couple more questions, because I have a creative idea that would like your feedback on. So thank you.
Then Teresa.
Hi, this is more for like tying to Robert's statement before about the scope of people that could benefit the use of a communal space. When you consider, when you are considering that, will you be reaching out to the community for feedback for people that are or possibly using the space? Because I represent a theater group, and what I would like to know is, will you be looking for our feedback as a theater group for usage of space? I know the core 5 takes precedence, but in terms of programming, theaters and artists and residents, those are future programming opportunities that you could take advantage of. But will you be reaching out to performance groups to use the space in the future?
So holistically, the idea of those spaces would be that they are for community use. I think as mentioned before, we have yet to think through what the governance structure of that looks like. But I definitely see us reaching out to broaden the awareness and kind of expand the access to the space. But as of right now, we don't know what that looks like. But I think the commitment and the goal is to ensure that this multi-purpose space that we're looking to build or construct, and again, those details need to be worked out, would be to reach a larger audience. I think we've heard that very clearly from the community, that they want a space where it's not just applicable to those who have previously used the space or those directly in the immediate surrounding area of 70 Mulberry, but throughout the entire area of Chinatown. Folks want to be able to use that space for potentially one-offs or conferences or what have you. So we are looking to do that. And Teresa, if you have suggestions on, or if there is a theater or arts or cultural listserv that has ideas on what that could look like, similar to what our friend Robert was saying earlier, please email us. We're happy to think through what that looks like as kind of a togetherness, and that could, I'm saying this on the call, that could look like us having a potential separate Zoom meeting with just those folks to kind of talk about what a potential welcome center or theater space could look like. Again, not making any promises that, you know, a theater space is going to happen, or this is going to happen, or that's going to happen, but just getting the nuts and bolts of what that could look like and what are the requirements to have such a space would be helpful. So if you want to follow up with me and you have some other folks who would be interested in having that conversation, please send me an email and we're happy to set that up to talk about it.
I know you're playing the gathering ingredients portion right now with all of us sitting here, and you're like the pot that's got to take in all our feedback at this point. And I appreciate you taking the time to answer our questions here.
Thank you.
Just want to direct Amy's question. Her mic is not working. My question is, $4 million for a modernized elevator for 70 Mulberry was part of the community give back for the mega jail. So how will that money be used now? Will that be added to the 80 million?
Great question. As of right now, that money is still slated for the elevator. If you look in the budget, it is still slated for the elevator project. As you are aware, there's not an elevator project right now. That money has not been authorized to be reused somewhere else at this point. And so the answer directly tonight is I don't know.
Why can't you combine it and have $84 million?
I think that's possible, but I don't authorize that. That was actually something that was put in the budget a while back, and so we don't have just unilateral authority to combine 80 and 4. But I see your point. I have not paid enough attention to that to see whether that's possible. So if you, and again, I'm telling folks to email this 70 Mulberry at DCAS, but I will follow up with you. So if you want to email Amy, I think you have my other email too, but you have my email. If you want to follow up with me with that question, I will get you an answer.
Thank you. Kelly, would you want to, I think you have your hand raised, Kelly Tang.
Yes. Hi, thank you so much for hosting the 70 Mulberry community meeting.
Could I just ask you to speak up a little bit louder? It's a bit difficult to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I think it's a little bit better, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for hosting community meeting for the 70 Mulberry Street building. So my name is Kelly Tang. I'm from the Chinese Consolidated Novel Association. So we are here in the Chinatown community for over a century. So I think this were three important points. I just want to wrap up at the before the end of this meeting. So since we spend millions of dollars on building this 70 Mulberry Street location, so the best way is to spending not wasting this money is to maximize the use of the land, right, and the budget, and then also try to benefit the most people we can. And then I know there's the 5 original organizations are worried when they can go back to the 70 Mulberry, and I think this is not, they should not be worried because CCBA have a very good proposal that we have submitted to 3x3 to facilitator Ms. Perenka before, and we showed the proposal to most of the Chinatown traditional organizations who are also along that. So I think and they are all agree for the proposal. So I would like to share the proposal to you later to send to more people. So our proposal is basically says that we can rebuild the 70 Mulberry in two different stages. So we can have first 2 years we can have welcome back the 5 original organizations, and then later on when we have a more budget, we can on the same construction we can build up the floors, and then also we can do a lot of maybe affordable housing to benefit more seniors and more low-income families. So just like we say, try to use the maximum land and then we can and then benefit most of the people. So do you mind I can send you the proposal to both of you later, like Mr. Hennes and then Miss Isabella?
Kelly, we were not sure if we heard you correctly. It seems you want to send a proposal, which
yeah, we would like to share a proposal from us.
You can send it to 70 Mulberry at, I'll put the email in the chat box. And the recommendations are already out. I'm sure it's in alignment with what, it seems to be in alignment with what you are saying, and DCAS would be happy to go.
Yes, actually we send it to you, I think.
And we did review all the documents that were sent to us, and they did inform all the recommendations. And you will find yourself listed in the report.
Yeah, just like say we already spent, we are going to spend like $1 million. Just try not wasting the money and not wasting the land. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Wong, would you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. I'm also a Xian Wong. I'm a painter in the neighborhood. I appreciate that this whole process have resulted in truly listening to the community on the basics of what we desire 70 Mulberry to remain. And that is a cultural hub. As a painter, as an artist, is one way for all of us in the community to express and to further to educate and whatnot. And I wanted to express to Quentin that as you know, in the history of America, communities like us, minority communities, have always been struggling to preserve our history, and the anxiety that you feel and the worries that you hear from the participants here, I believe you would agree is well-founded based on history. So I hope you don't take it personally in any ways in the way the community is responding to what DCAS may do, could do going forward. I think you can bet on it that the entire community would like to work with you, and I look forward to working with you as well in making sure that 70 Mulberry, which is really a jam for this particular community, in preserving and also educating, for histories to come about, Chinese Americans, our experiences, and for us as a community to grow together. So I just wanted to say that, and I look forward to the work that you will be doing at 70 Mulberry.
Thank you for that. I appreciate the sentiment, and I too look forward to working with you. And I am, and I said this at the beginning, I am truly inspired about this. I hope I have an honorary membership at 70 Mulberry and in the Chinatown community. I really appreciate both the thoughtfulness that has gone into this process, but also the passion and the ideas that have come out of this process. So I hear you loud and clear, and I look forward to working with you and everyone else.
Amy has a second question. I think I missed it earlier. If the mayor's capital budget allocation of 8 million for design in June 2022 and 72 million for construction June 2024, is that an accurate reflection of DCAS rebuilding timetable?
So the way the capital budget works is that we project out when we are going to start both design and construction through just normal or other projects. And so there is just a formula where we normally do design really takes 12 to 14 months. And then construction starts right after that. And so that's how that timeline looks in there. We won't know whether that timeline that is reflected in the budget is realistic until we actually understand what we're designing. And so that was the anticipated both allocation of funding so that we would need those funds in that year. I will tell you, in doing projects throughout the city, those funds shift. And so those funds could be pushed forward if needed, and vice versa. And so that is not, that capital money budget allocation is not the timeline. It is just where the funds are actually available for us to access. And that can be changed depending upon the process.
Carrie Culhane asked, the firm that conducted the second engineering assessment, I believe the name is Simpson Comforts, are not MWBE. Why does the preservation assessment have to be MWBE procurement?
To carry to your question, there are some firms, architectural firms, and engineering firms that the city has already on contract for our buildings, and that was one of them. So that's how we were able to go directly with them, because we use them for the rest of our building portfolio. So for the preservation assessment, again, it is also a timing thing. And so if you were to do a normal procurement where you would open it up to any and everybody who would want to bid on this, you're talking about 4 to 6 months.
Yin has, Vic, I will come to your question. Yin has a following question, which says, is MWBE certification a requirement for procurement, or is it a preference? And then she follows and says, MWBE sometimes is constraining. Even women or minority-owned businesses don't have the certification. For instance, women, minority-led nonprofits who specialize in community engagement were eligible for this project, since nonprofits can't get the certification.
Yeah, and I hear you, Yin, and Carrie, and I appreciate the sentiment. I will just say that we also have to acknowledge and recognize that this is a city procurement process. And so the city has the rules and regulations, regardless if we're talking about this procurement or another procurement, that we have to follow. And so I am very constrained in what I can do. I think there are trade-offs to either or. I think we always want to support our MWBE community. So there's that. We want to make sure that this is done in a timely and efficient way. And so there's also that. But and also the folks that are certified MWBEs and that have stated that they are and do offer this service, we have to recognize them for that, right? If they are telling us that they are experts in this field and they have the qualifications, or they meet the qualifications requirements, then they are qualified and eligible to bid on this contract, and we do have to consider them. And that's part of the process. I will also say, as I am so glad that we were able to get 3x3. 3x3 was also, we were able to procure 3x3 in the timeline that we needed to do this through this process as well. And so there are some trade-offs that we have to do. I mean, I think that when you think about how do you do it quickly, how do you do it right, and how do you do it in a way that's also giving back to minority and women-owned businesses, this is the way that we've chosen to go. If there's a thought process that we had an infinite amount of time and we were okay with doing a procurement that could take up to 4 to 6 months, and that's not even actually doing the work, we're talking about just the procurement, then we're talking about, you know, pushing this timeline back a lot. And so those are the concerns and the trade-offs. And I'm really just trying to tell you the process that we went through. And we really ended up going with the quicker process, knowing that the MWBE firms that were eligible for this work were qualified and are qualified and have done business with the city, may not be directly with DCAS, but have done business with the city. And so that's how the decision was made, just to kind of give you some insight.
And then Vic says, if the city doesn't have the money, is it possible for the community to raise funds or add to the funding of the building?
So I am not sure. I'm not sure how that would work. I'm not sure if the city can accept that gift. That's more of a legal question. But Vic, if that's something that you want us to explore, I'm happy to work with the requisite folks and see if that's possible.
It's Gail Brewer. It is possible.
Hey, Gail.
It's possible, just so you know.
There we go.
You could make this.
Thank you, President Brewer.
With that, we are coming at the closing of this meeting. If you want to share additional feedback and questions related to the report that is now on the website and this presentation, please email it to 70mulberry@dcas.nyc.gov. I put it in the chat again. to the people whose email I have, I am happy to send this email and link to the website. If you want us to send you an email, please feel free to input your email in this chat as well. We did not do any registration process for this community meeting because we wanted it to be open. So we wouldn't have emails if you've not registered prior to this meeting. With that, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for bearing with us through this whole process. We loved hearing the community and love putting the whole report together. And we truly believe and we hope that it reflects the voice of the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Have a great holiday, everybody.
Bye, Quentin. Bye, everybody.
I'm going to end meeting for all. Just giving a minute for anyone to enter their email in the chat if you've not previously registered for the community meetings. All right. I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.